my father replied in less than 2 minutes. Come alone. Evelyn saw the response on my screen and laughed. Absolutely not. At exactly 5 o'clock the next evening, Leo and I walked into the cramped administrative office attached to my father's commercial warehouse. Evelyn parked right outside the large glass window, keeping the engine running and her eyes fixed firmly on the door. I had my phone's voice memo app running in my coat pocket and a secondary digital recorder clearly visible in my hand. My father was sitting behind his heavy oak desk, looking like a cornered king expecting tribute. My mother stood rigidly beside him, her eyes red, her makeup perfectly applied to project the image of a grieving, heartbroken mother. Thomas did not say hello. He did not ask how Leo was feeling after his panic attack. His first words were a direct, venomous command. Unlock the corporate accounts immediately. I stepped forward and dropped the heavy manila folder directly onto the center of his desk. No. His face darkened instantly, the veins in his forehead pulsing. Excuse me? No, I repeated, my voice completely steady. The accounts remain frozen because they are legally bound to my social security number and my personal corporate guarantee. You use them dangerously beyond the agreed scope of legitimate business expenses. You let massive balances roll over month after month. You made reckless personal charges. And now, you are publicly accusing me of theft because I simply stopped funding your lifestyle. My mother gasped, dramatically clutching her chest. How dare you speak to your father like he is a common criminal? I ignored her theatrics, opened the folder, and slid the first stack of highlighted papers across the desk. This is the original guarantor agreement. Primary account holder, Sarah Jenkins. Authorized users, Thomas and Martha Jenkins. And this, I slid another piece of paper forward, is the statement showing a $4,000 charge at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. This is a $300 charge at a luxury day spa. This is a $1,200 steakhouse dinner from the exact same night you told me the warehouse payroll was dangerously short. With a sudden, violent sweep of his arm, my father slapped the papers off the desk. They scattered wildly across the cheap carpet. Leo flinched and instinctively took a step back. I did not move an inch. Pick them up, I demanded. The room went dead silent. Martha stepped forward, her voice dropping to an anxious, pleading whisper. Sarah, please, do not make this ugly. I looked right through her. You made it ugly, Martha, the exact moment you told Aunt Diane that I stole from this company. My father stood up, planting his hands heavily on the desk, breathing hard. You think a few printed papers make you powerful, you ungrateful little girl? Do you have any idea what I gave up for you? I built this entire family from the ground up. There it was. The ultimate trap. The invisible invoice that toxic parents hold over their children's heads from the moment they are born. He wanted me to feel the crushing weight of his supposed sacrifices. He wanted to paralyze me with guilt. I met his furious gaze and delivered the absolute truth. You built debt. I maintained the illusion. That sentence landed like a physical strike. His eyes darted nervously toward the warehouse window, where two of his foremen were clearly pretending not to watch the confrontation. He lowered his voice, his tone turning to pure, unfiltered malice. You are not my daughter anymore. For my entire life, that specific threat would have completely destroyed me. I would have dropped to my knees and begged for his forgiveness. But standing in that dingy office, surrounded by the undeniable proof of his exploitation, I realized something profoundly liberating. He was using fatherhood as an authoritative title while completely avoiding every responsibility that came with the job. I nodded slowly. That might be the very first honest thing you have said to me in years. His mouth opened, but he was completely speechless. The narcissistic collapse was happening in real time. I continued, my voice ringing with absolute finality. Tomorrow morning, I am filing formal disputes on every single personal charge you made. I am officially removing both of you as authorized users. The banks will receive corrected statements. And if one more relative or business partner contacts me saying that I stole from Jenkins Property Solutions, I will mass email this entire folder of evidence to every single person in your contact list." My mother's anger dissolved instantly into sheer panic. "Sarah, please. If we lose the commercial bid tomorrow, we lose the warehouse. We can fix this as a family." "No," Leo said. We all turned to look at him. My brother's voice was shaking slightly, but he stood his ground, looking directly at the parents who had tormented him. "You do not want a family. You just want access to a wallet." My father grabbed his desk phone, threatening to call lawyers, screaming about public shame, police involvement, and ruin. I simply let him rant until he ran out of breath. Then I tapped the digital recorder in my hand. "This conversation has been thoroughly recorded. You were notified in writing. Good luck with the commercial bid." I turned around and walked out the door. Leo followed right behind me. We did not look back, not even when we heard the sound of something heavy smashing against the office wall. The worst was over. Now, it was time for the consequences to arrive. The weeks that followed our departure from the Jenkins Property Solutions office were not cinematic. There was no dramatic montage of instant healing, nor was there a perfect, painless transition into a brand new life. Reality is much slower, and consequences do not arrive like a lightning strike. They arrive like the Daily Mail. One notice, one denial, and one canceled contract at a time. The very next morning, my father's company officially lost the commercial bid. Without the massive line of credit backed by my guarantee, they could not secure the upfront materials required by the corporate developers. The domino effect was immediate and brutal. Within 3 days, 2 major suppliers switched the company to strict cash-only terms. The fuel accounts for the work trucks remained securely frozen. Thomas and Martha were suddenly forced to operate a business using only the actual cash they had in the bank, and for people who had spent a decade floating on my credit limit, reality hit them like a freight train. My mother called me exactly once, 2 weeks later. It was from an unrecognized number, so I answered cautiously. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice completely stripped of its usual theatrical flair. She sounded genuinely small. "Your father has not slept in days. We have to sell the warehouse to cover the vendor debts. Please, you have to help us." I closed my eyes. A tiny, deeply ingrained part of the old me wanted to swoop in, sign a paper, and fix the disaster. That was the childhood trauma bond trying to reassert itself. But the new version of me, the one built on hard evidence and self-respect, held the line. "I am sorry you are dealing with that, Martha," I said calmly. "But I am no longer funding your mistakes." She hesitated. "So, that is it? You are just going to let us lose everything?" "No," I replied. "I am just setting my first real boundary." I hung up the phone and blocked the number. The first month at Aunt Evelyn's house taught Leo and me an incredible lesson about what peace actually feels like. Peace is not just the absence of yelling. Peace is a locked bedroom door that nobody tries to kick open. Peace is sitting at a dinner table without constantly scanning the room to gauge the mood of the most volatile person present. Leo slowly learned how to sleep through the night. His nervous system regulated, and his panic attacks stopped entirely. He enrolled back in college and took a part-time job at a campus technology center. For the first time in his life, his income was his own, and his future was not conditional on our father's approval. Many people assume that taking this kind of drastic action against your own parents brings a euphoric sense of victory. I did not celebrate when I heard they eventually downsized the company and sold their luxury vehicles to pay off the bank. I thought revenge would feel like fireworks illuminating the sky. Instead, it felt like standing at the absolute edge of a scorched field, simply relieved that the fire had finally burned itself out. I still work in financial management, but I run my private bookkeeping firm with tighter, ironclad contracts. Evelyn frequently jokes that my family trauma turned me into the most meticulous auditor in the entire state of Ohio. Perhaps she is right. I document everything now. I require signatures for everything, and I deeply understand the immense power of a written record. If you are listening to this story right now, and you are the person in your family who is constantly called selfish simply because you finally learned how to say the word no, I want you to burn this into your memory. Boundaries do not destroy healthy families. They only expose the deeply unhealthy ones. If maintaining your personal peace costs someone else their control over you, that does not mean your boundary is wrong. It means their control was never actually love. Real family can be disappointed in you without trying to destroy your character. Real family can experience financial hardship without turning you into an unpaid insurance policy. Real family does not kick you out into the cold, only to panic when your credit cards stop working. The night my father pointed at the door and told me they did not need me, his goal was to make me feel entirely worthless. But instead, he accidentally handed me the exact key to my own freedom. Because if they did not need me, they did not need my credit score. They did not need my endless labor. They did not need my brother as collateral. They threw me out because they thought I would eventually come crawling back, begging to be useful again. But the real shock was not that the account suddenly froze. The real shock was that for the first time in my entire life, I refused to thaw them out. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am 27 years old. And the night my father threw me out of his house, he forgot one crucial detail. The very foundation of his business and the roof over his head rested entirely on my name. I had just walked through the front door after a grueling 14-hour shift managing accounts at a corporate logistics firm. I was exhausted, my feet ached, and I was looking forward to nothing but a hot shower and sleep. Instead, I found my parents waiting for me in the kitchen. Spread across the marble island were 3 past-due notices and a rejected supplier invoice for our family business, Jenkins Property Solutions. Before I could even take off my coat, my father, Thomas, slammed his fist on the counter. The sound echoed through the quiet house like a gunshot. "You are destroying this family," he shouted, pointing a thick finger at my face like I was a disobedient employee. "We are 2 days away from bidding on the biggest commercial contract this company has ever seen, and you let the supplier account bounce. You failed us." My mother, Martha, stood beside him, her arms tightly crossed. She did not yell. She just looked at me with that familiar, icy disappointment. "We do not need this kind of sabotage, Sarah. If you are not going to support this family, pack your things and leave. We do not need you." For a moment, the room was dead silent. I looked at the gold-embossed business credit card sitting right next to my father's coffee mug. It had his name stamped on the front. But the account behind it? That was backed entirely by my personal credit score, my private bookkeeping business, and the guarantor paperwork they had guilt-tripped me into signing 3 years ago when Jenkins Property Solutions was on the brink of absolute bankruptcy. I did not argue. I did not shed a single tear. I calmly picked up my purse, turned my back on them, and walked out the front door into the freezing night. The moment I sat in my car, I pulled out my phone, logged into the banking portal, and suspended every single credit line tied to my social security number, the corporate cards, the fuel accounts, the emergency expense limits, all of it, frozen. Before I tell you exactly what my father did when he realized his empire was suddenly running on empty, and what happened when the storm finally hit, do me a favor. Tell me what time it is where you are right now, and what city or state you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels tonight. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway, the engine idling. I watched the warm light spilling from the kitchen window like absolutely nothing had changed, but everything had changed. My father had always believed that whoever shouted the loudest owned the room. My mother had always believed that guilt was the master key that could unlock my wallet. But money was the one language they never actually understood. They spent it, hid it, mismanaged it, and then called me selfish when I refused to drown with them. Exactly 15 minutes after I froze the accounts, my phone lit up in the cup holder. It was a call from my father, then another, then my mother, then the main office line, then a frantic call from an unknown number that I instantly recognized as their lead contractor, likely standing at a checkout counter with a declined card and a truck full of unpaid lumber. In the span of 3 minutes, 22 missed calls flooded my screen. They kicked me out because they thought they did not need me. But they were about to learn a very brutal lesson about who actually held the keys to the kingdom. The drive to Aunt Evelyn's house was a blur of wet pavement and blinding streetlights. Every time my tires hit a puddle, the sound mirrored the rushing in my ears. Inside the car, my phone continued its relentless vibration against the center console, lighting up the dark interior with a new name, a new threat, or a new plea every few seconds. For one dangerous, terrifying moment at a red light, I almost turned the steering wheel. I almost went back. That is the insidious nature of growing up in a manipulative household. Your brain is conditioned to fear their anger more than you value your own survival. My heart was hammering against my ribs, and my breathing was shallow, rapid, and uneven. These were the classic metabolic signs of acute stress, a physiological warning that my nervous system was entirely overwhelmed. The old version of me, the trained daughter, wanted to rush back, unlock the accounts, and apologize for making my father yell. I had spent my entire adult life acting as the shock absorber for their financial recklessness, but then I looked at the glowing screen of my phone. A text preview from my father read, "Turn the cards back on, or I will call the police and tell them you embezzled from the company." The sheer audacity of that threat washed over me like ice water. It stopped my racing heart and snapped me out of my panic. I pressed my foot onto the gas pedal and drove straight to the west side of the city. Aunt Evelyn opened her front door before I even had the chance to knock. She was my mother's older sister, but they could not have been more different. Evelyn was a retired forensic auditor. She did not deal in emotions. She dealt in ledgers, paper trails, and cold, hard facts. She stood in the doorway wearing a heavy knitted sweater, looking at my pale face and the rain soaking my shoulders. "Did Thomas finally cross the line?" she asked. Her voice was steady, completely devoid of surprise. I nodded once. I froze the accounts. All of them. She stepped aside and motioned for me to come inside. She did not offer me a hug, and that was exactly what I needed. Comfort would have made me crumble, and I could not afford to fall apart tonight. She locked the heavy deadbolt behind me, pointed to the kitchen table, and told me to sit down. "Put your phone on the table," Evelyn instructed as she filled an electric kettle with water. "Face up. Do not turn it off. Let them make noise, and more importantly, let them put their threats in writing. Panic makes liars very sloppy." We sat under the harsh, bright light of her kitchen pendant lamp and opened my laptop. For the next 3 hours, my Aunt Evelyn and I did not cry, and we did not vent. We built an impenetrable fortress of evidence. I downloaded the original guarantor agreements from 3 years ago, highlighting the clauses that proved the credit lines were legally tied to my personal bookkeeping entity. Then, we pulled up the last 12 months of Jenkins Property Solutions credit card statements. When you look at financial trauma laid out on a spreadsheet, the gaslighting loses its power. I highlighted the charges that had nothing to do with buying lumber or paying subcontractors. There were thousands of dollars funneled into my father's weekend golf trips, which he categorized as client networking. There were the high-end cosmetic dermatology appointments my mother charged to the corporate account under office maintenance. They were draining the lifeblood of the company, expecting me to cover the shortfall every month before it damaged my personal credit score. Around midnight, my mother left a voicemail. Evelyn pressed the speaker button, and Martha's voice filled the quiet kitchen. "Sarah, sweetheart," my mother cooed, her tone dripping with a forced, fragile sweetness. "Your father is just under immense pressure with the commercial bid this week. You made your point. Now please unlock the accounts before the suppliers talk and embarrass us in front of the board." Evelyn let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "There it is. She is not worried that you are out in the cold. She is terrified of a public relations scandal." My father's voicemails were a stark contrast. He did not ask. He demanded. He threatened lawsuits, public shaming, and disownment. He called me a thief, a parasite, and a failure. He was completely unraveling. I sat back in my chair, feeling a strange sense of detachment. I was finally safe, shielded by the indisputable truth sitting in the folders on my hard drive. But my momentary peace shattered instantly when a new text message appeared on my screen. It was not from my parents. It was from my younger brother, Leo. "Sarah, please help me," the text read. "Dad just smashed a chair against the wall. He took my car keys. My chest hurts so bad I cannot breathe. My hands are completely numb. I think I am dying." The blood drained from my face. I knew exactly what was happening to him. It was a severe, hyperventilating panic attack brought on by extreme psychological trauma. I had drawn my boundary and saved myself, but I had left my 21-year-old brother trapped inside the blast zone with a man who was rapidly losing his mind. My heart dropped to the floor. Reading Leo's text, I knew exactly what was happening to his body. Numb hands, crushing chest pain, and a severe inability to catch his breath. To a 21-year-old, it feels exactly like a massive cardiac event, but I recognized it as the acute physiological manifestation of sheer terror. His nervous system was going into a complete metabolic collapse. My father was pushing Leo into a severe, hyperventilating panic attack. I stood up so fast my chair scraped violently against Evelyn's hardwood floor. "I have to go back," I said, grabbing my wet coat from the back of the chair. Evelyn did not hesitate. She picked up her car keys and her heavy coat. "You are not going alone," she stated firmly. "Thomas is erratic, and erratic men do incredibly dangerous things when their money is suddenly cut off." The drive back to my parents' house felt infinitely longer than the drive away. I called Leo, putting him on speakerphone while Evelyn navigated the rain-slicked streets. I could hear his jagged, gasping breaths echoing through the car. I had to step into crisis mode. Using a calm, measured voice, I instructed him to focus on a fixed point in the room, to breathe in for 4 seconds and hold for 4. I had to force his heart rate down before he fainted from the lack of oxygen. "I am almost there, Leo," I promised over the phone. "Get outside. Do not argue with him. Do not try to pack your room. Just grab what you have and get to the driveway." When Evelyn's car pulled up to the curb, the rain was coming down in thick, freezing sheets. Under the dim yellow light of the detached garage overhang, I saw my brother. He was huddled against the wet brick wall, clutching a damp canvas backpack to his chest like a shield. He was shivering violently, his face pale and completely drained of color. Seeing him reduced to this state of physical and emotional exhaustion ignited a cold, intensely focused anger inside of me. Before I could even open my door, the side entrance of the house burst open. My father stormed out into the pouring rain, barefoot and completely ignoring the weather. His face was a dark, dangerous red, the veins bulging in his neck. In his clenched fist, he was holding Leo's car keys. "Get back inside right now!" Thomas roared over the sound of the storm. "You are not leaving with her. She is a traitor to this family." My mother appeared in the doorway seconds later. She was wearing a silk robe, safely shielded from the rain under the porch roof. She crossed her arms, her eyes darting nervously toward the dark windows of the neighboring houses. "Sarah, look at what you have done!" she yelled, her voice dripping with manufactured victimhood. "You are tearing your brother apart. You are poisoning his mind against us." Evelyn rolled down her driver's side window just a few inches. Her voice cut through the chaos, sharp, flat, and deeply authoritative. "Thomas, lower your voice immediately. The Harrisons next door have a high-definition security camera pointed directly at this driveway. I am quite sure the police would love to review the footage of you holding a young man hostage in the rain." That single sentence was a tactical strike. My father's jaw clamped shut. If there was one thing Thomas Jenkins cared about more than money, it was the illusion of his respectable upper-middle-class reputation. I stepped out of the car, letting the freezing rain soak my clothes. I walked straight toward him, stopping just a few feet away. "Give him his keys," I demanded, keeping my voice dangerously low. Thomas scoffed, a desperate, ugly sound. "These are my keys. The car is on my insurance policy. The loan is under his name, but I pay for it. He works for me. He lives under my roof. He owes me obedience." "Then keep the car," I replied instantly. I watched his eyes widen. I had just stripped away his primary piece of leverage. I turned my attention entirely away from my father and looked at my brother. Leo looked terrified. His hands were still trembling, caught in that invisible, agonizing tug of war between his lifelong training to obey and his desperate need to survive. He was waiting for someone to give him permission to save himself. "Leo," I said gently, making sure he looked me directly in the eyes. "You do not have to make a final decision about the rest of your life tonight. But you absolutely do not have to stand in the freezing rain while they punish you for a boundary that I set. You can get in the car." My father stepped closer to Leo, his voice dropping into a menacing, venomous sneer. "Go ahead, choose her, walk away. But if you get in that car, you are off the company payroll, your tuition assistance is permanently cut, and you are never stepping foot in this house again." It was the ultimate ultimatum. For years, that exact threat had kept us paralyzed and compliant. But seeing it weaponized against a boy who was recovering from a severe panic attack finally broke the spell. Leo looked at the keys in my father's hand, then he looked at the dark house, and finally, he looked at me. He did not say a single word. He just tightened his grip on his backpack, walked right past my father, stepped into the pouring rain, and climbed into the back seat of Evelyn's car. The moment the heavy car door slammed shut, my mother began to cry. But it was not the frantic, genuine weeping of a mother losing her child. It was a loud, performative sob meant entirely for an audience. "After everything we sacrificed for you two," she wailed into the night. I stood in the driveway, looking at the woman who had enabled and justified every ounce of psychological abuse we had ever endured. I finally asked the question that had been suffocating me for 2 decades. Was it a sacrifice, Martha? Or was it just financial control disguised with better branding? She stopped crying instantly. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She had no answer, because you cannot argue with the truth when it is standing right in front of you, entirely unafraid. I got into the passenger seat, and Evelyn drove us away into the dark. In the back, Leo was taking slow, deep breaths, his nervous system finally beginning to regulate. The immediate danger was over, but the war was far from finished. Tomorrow morning, the banks would open, the commercial suppliers would check their balances, and Thomas Jenkins was about to discover exactly what happens when the money officially stops. Over the next 72 hours, my parents transformed our family dynamic into a kangaroo court where they served as the judge, the jury, and the ultimate victims. My phone became a toxic wasteland of text messages from cousins, former neighbors, and people I had not spoken to since high school. The story my father spun was a masterpiece of manipulation. According to Thomas, I had illegally hacked into the corporate accounts out of spite. According to Martha, I had selfishly abandoned the family during a catastrophic financial emergency. The rumor mill is a powerful weapon in a narcissistic family structure. They relied heavily on the fact that most people will blindly believe a crying mother and an outraged father. But they fundamentally forgot one crucial detail. I had the receipts. On the 4th morning, Aunt Evelyn slid a thick manila folder across her kitchen table and looked me dead in the eye. "You have 2 options right now," she said. "You can let them own the narrative and ruin your professional reputation, or you can answer them with hard documentation. Silence is a luxury you can no longer afford." I did not want a messy public revenge. I just wanted peace. But peace required a permanent, indisputable severing of their control. So I drafted a single, legally precise email and sent it to my parents, copying Aunt Evelyn and my father's senior business partner. The email read, "I will meet you once at the Jenkins Property Solutions office at 5 o'clock tomorrow evening. We will review the frozen accounts, the outstanding balances, and the false accusations you have publicly spread. I will be recording this meeting for my own legal protection. If you refuse, all future communication will be directed to my attorney."